It started with a whisper that grew into a storm. Cameras were already rolling when Yandy Smith walked into the penthouse that afternoon. Her face unreadable, her phone still in her hand. Outside, reporters were already gathering, chasing the headline that was about to set the internet on fire. The rumors had been simmering for weeks, but no one expected what came next. A DNA test, a shocking confirmation, and a public confrontation that would tear apart one of reality TV's most talked about families. "Tell me you didn't know," Yandy said, her voice trembling between disbelief and fury. Across the room, Mena's eyes darted between the cameras and Mendeecees, who stood frozen, his silence louder than any denial. The room crackled with tension as everyone realized that the whispers were true. The DNA test confirmed Mendeecees was the father, and Yandy's world, built on loyalty and image, had just been split in two. Within minutes, the story spread like wildfire. Fans flooded social media with disbelief, accusing Erica of betrayal and Mendeecees of deceit. Clips of the confrontation leaked before the episode even aired. "This is the ultimate scandal," one blogger posted. "We've seen cheating scandals. We've seen fights, but this is different. This is family." By nightfall, #YandyVs Erica was trending across every platform, with fans replaying the footage, analyzing every glare, every word, every tear. Those close to Yandy said they had never seen her so angry. Friends described her pacing her home in Harlem, repeating, "She was supposed to be my friend." It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Erica had been welcomed into her circle, shared dinners, laughed on camera, and posed for pictures that now looked like setups in hindsight. The DNA results, delivered in a sealed envelope on camera, didn't just confirm paternity, they ignited a chain reaction that no one could control. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. The footage was gold, but it was volatile. Sources claimed Yandy refused to film for days after the reveal, demanding that certain scenes be cut. Erica, on the other hand, played to the spotlight, insisting she had nothing to hide. "It's not my fault the truth came out," she told a crew member off camera. "People want to hate me because I'm honest." But when Yandy showed up at the reunion taping, everything changed. She didn't come to talk. She came for answers. The audience fell silent as she stormed the stage, the sound of her heels echoing like gunfire. "You destroyed my family," she shouted, pointing at Erica, who stood up slowly, smiling as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Fans were glued to their screens. Some said Yandy was justified. Others claimed Erica was being scapegoated for a truth everyone had tried to bury. As producers tried to restore order, Yandy moved closer, her voice breaking through the chaos. "You took everything from me, and now you want sympathy." The crowd gasped, cameras zoomed in, and Erica's smirk finally faded. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in love and hip-hop history, a confrontation that blurred the line between reality and revenge. And as the dust settled, one question lingered in every viewer's mind. Was this the end of Yandy and Mendeecees, or just the beginning of a feud that would redefine them both? The cameras caught the moment Yandy's voice cracked, that split second when anger turned into disbelief. The air in the room was heavy, like everyone had stopped breathing at once. Mendeecees stood a few steps away, his face blank, hands buried deep in his pockets, avoiding her eyes. The DNA test envelope lay open on the table, that single piece of paper that had detonated everything they built. Fans would later call it the scene that changed everything. But right now it was just pain-raw, public, and unavoidable. "Say something," Yandy whispered, her voice shaking. "Just say it's not true." But he didn't. And that silence was louder than any confession. Erica leaned back in her chair, eyes cold, a smirk barely hidden behind her gloss. "You wanted the truth, didn't you?" she said softly, her tone cutting. "Now you have it." The crew didn't move. Nobody dared. It wasn't just another argument. It was betrayal televised. One producer later said that everyone in the room could feel it, the rending, family-breaking kind of drama that turns into headlines before the episode even airs. Yandy turned away, pacing the floor, one hand pressed against her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from falling out. "After everything I defended you through," she said, looking at Mendeecees. "After everything I lost trying to stand by you. And this is what I get." Mendeecees finally looked up, his voice low, almost apologetic. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't know for sure. I didn't want to believe it either." "You didn't want to believe it," she shot back. "You think I care what you wanted to believe? You made me look like a fool." Mendeecees, on national television, off camera, someone whispered, "Keep rolling," because they knew this was gold. The moment spread like wildfire online. Leaked footage hit gossip blogs within hours. Captions reading Yandy loses it after DNA reveal. Fans flooded the comments. Some were heartbroken, others ruthless. Karma. One wrote, "She did the same to someone else years ago." Another said, "You can see her whole world fall apart in her eyes." But what no one saw was what happened after the cameras stopped. Yandy walked out, slammed the door, and vanished into the hallway. Mendeecees followed, calling her name, but she didn't turn around. Security blocked the exits as producers tried to calm everyone down. Erica stayed seated, sipping water like nothing happened, pretending not to hear the shouting echoing through the walls. "You're proud of yourself?" A crew member asked her quietly. "I didn't lie," she replied, shrugging. "The truth hurts, doesn't it?" The next morning, every blog, every entertainment page had the story. DNA drama rocks, love and hip-hop. One headline read, "Mendeecees caught in paternity scandal," said another. Interviews were requested, statements were drafted, but Yandy stayed silent. For 3 days, she didn't post, didn't answer calls. Those close to her said she wasn't just hurt, she was broken. In her private circle, she told friends she felt betrayed by everyone. They knew, she said, convinced that some crew members, maybe even castmates, had heard the rumor long before it aired. "They sat there smiling in my face, and they knew." Meanwhile, Erica leaned into the attention. She posted a cryptic message. "The truth always wins." It was enough to send fans into chaos. Comments exploded, threats poured in, and producers worried the feud was spinning out of control. When filming resumed, Yandy arrived late, wearing dark glasses and no makeup, her expression unreadable. Mendeecees tried to approach her before the scene started, but she waved him off. "You've said enough," she murmured. The crew rolled. The set was a lounge in Midtown, dim lights, a fake sense of calm. Everyone sat down. Yandy, Mendeecees, Erica, and a few others under the watchful eyes of the cameras. "So, we're here to talk about what happened," the producer's voice said off-screen. "Let's start with you, Yandy." She took a deep breath. "There's nothing to talk about," she said. "I saw the results. I heard the lies. I just want to know how long you were both laughing behind my back." Erica's eyes narrowed. "You really think I planned this? You think I wanted this drama?" "You thrive on drama," Yandy replied. "It's what you do. You walk into people's lives, destroy what you can, and call it honesty." Mendeecees tried to interject. "It's not about destroying anything. It's about no." She cut him off. "It's about you lying. To me, to your family, to yourself." The tension was suffocating. The other cast members avoided eye contact, pretending to check their phones or sip drinks. The producer's voice came again, softer this time. "Yandy, are you saying you're done?" She looked straight into the camera. "I'm saying I don't recognize the man sitting next to me, and I don't want to." That line would go viral. Clips of it replayed endlessly, fans quoting it under slow-motion edits with sad music. Hashtags trended, petitions started. "Protect Yandy," one read. Others accused her of playing victim. It was chaos, the kind of messy, emotional television that people couldn't look away from. Behind the scenes though, something darker was brewing. A crew insider leaked that Mendeecees had been avoiding filming with Yandy. "He says he wants to fix things privately," the source said, but she doesn't believe him. Producers pushed for a joint interview, knowing it would pull record ratings. Mendeecees agreed, hesitantly. Yandy didn't until she learned Erica had been invited to appear too. That's when she said yes. "I'm not letting her rewrite my story," she told her manager. The day of the interview, the studio was packed. Makeup artists whispered, assistants hovered. When Yandy walked in, the room fell silent. Erica arrived minutes later, dressed in white, smiling like she owned the moment. Mendeecees came last, looking exhausted, eyes red. The interviewer, a seasoned entertainment host, wasted no time. "The world's been watching," she began. "People want to know where do things stand between you three?" Yandy crossed her legs, her voice steady but sharp. "There are no three. There's me, and there's people who disrespected me. I don't sit at tables with liars." Erica laughed under her breath. "Then you'll be eating alone for a long time." Mendeecees rubbed his temples. "This isn't helping," he muttered. The host pressed on. "Mendeecees, did you know about the possibility before the DNA results?" He hesitated. "I heard rumors, but I didn't believe them." Yandy turned sharply. "You didn't believe them, or you didn't care." The tension snapped. Voices rose, words collided. Yandy accused Erica of orchestrating the entire thing for clout. Erica fired back, calling Yandy fake, saying she'd built her image on lies. Mendeecees tried to play mediator, but his words were drowned out. The host tried to intervene, but the shouting grew louder until Yandy stood up, microphone in hand, eyes blazing. "You don't get to play victim," she told Erica. "You knew what you were doing. You went after a man who was still building his family, and you're proud of it. Don't flatter yourself," Erica replied, leaning forward. "He came to me. You were too busy being perfect for the cameras to see what was happening right in front of you." That line hit like a slap. Even the crew froze. Mendeecees looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Fans watching later would call it the moment everything broke. Clips spread across every platform. Reaction videos flooded YouTube, and even rival shows started weighing in. Some said Erica was cruel. Others claimed Yandy had it coming, but no one could deny one thing. This was television history in real time. After the interview ended, Yandy walked out without saying a word. She got into a black SUV, slammed the door, and disappeared. Erica stayed behind, joking with crew members, pretending not to notice the whispers around her. Mendeecees sat alone for a long time, staring at the floor. Outside, fans waited with cameras, shouting questions. "Yandy, are you leaving him? Erica, did you trap him?" Neither answered. And as night fell over the city, one thing was clear: this was no longer just a TV storyline. It had become a cultural storm, a viral obsession, and the beginning of a feud that no one could predict the end of. The night the interview aired, the city buzzed like it had witnessed a royal scandal. Every club, every hair salon, every corner of social media was repeating the same question: how could it end like this? Inside her apartment, Yandy sat by the window watching her phone light up over and over. Calls, messages, notifications, all demanding a reaction she didn't have the strength to give. She'd always been careful, always composed, but tonight the mask had cracked. Her voice from the interview replayed in short clips online. Her anger dissected by strangers who didn't know half the story. The crew had packed up hours ago. Mendeecees was somewhere downtown, staying with a friend to give her space, though that space felt more like distance growing roots. The kids were asleep at her mother's house, shielded from the chaos, but she knew it wouldn't last. By morning, they'd hear whispers at school, questions she couldn't answer without breaking down. In the quiet, she scrolled through her feed, watching her own life turned into memes and headlines. Yandy explodes after DNA bombshell. Erica wins again. Mendeecees caught in love triangle of the decade. Every word felt like salt. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe, but the sound of Erica's voice from the interview replayed in her mind. "He came to me. You were too busy being perfect for the cameras." It looped over and over until she threw her phone across the couch and pressed her hands to her face. Meanwhile, Erica was thriving in the storm. Her publicist had scheduled 3 interviews within 24 hours. One online talk show host called her the queen of transparency. She laughed through the segments, brushing off criticism, painting herself as the woman who just told the truth. Her tone was calm, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said into the camera, tilting her head. "People hate me because I don't hide behind a fake image." Fans ate it up. Her follower count skyrocketed overnight. Brands that had once cut ties were suddenly sending offers again. But behind the scenes, not everyone was celebrating. Her manager warned her that pushing too hard could backfire. "People love drama until it gets too real," he told her. "And right now, it's starting to feel too real." But Erica shrugged. "Real is what they want," she said, "and I'm giving it to them." Back in Harlem, Yandy's best friend Kim came over the next morning. She brought coffee in silence, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Yandy sat at the table, hair tied up, eyes swollen from crying. Kim reached across, touching her hand. "You gotta get ahead of this," she said softly. "Don't let them write your story for you. They already have," Yandy muttered. "Then rewrite it. Go on your page, go live, tell your side." "My side won't matter," Yandy said, staring at the floor. "They want a villain, and I look like one if I stay quiet." Kim leaned in. "Then don't stay quiet." Later that day, Yandy opened her phone again. She hesitated for a long time before tapping the button to go live. Thousands joined within seconds. Her face appeared on the screen, raw, unfiltered. She didn't wear makeup, didn't smile. She just spoke. "I'm not here to drag anybody," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here because I need people to understand something. Betrayal doesn't start when someone cheats. It starts when people you trust stop being honest with you. And that's what hurts the most." The comments poured in hearts, crying emojis, words of support. Others were cruel, calling her dramatic, fake, attention hungry. But she didn't stop. "What happened wasn't just about a DNA test," she said. "It was about respect, about trust. And right now, I feel like I don't know who I can trust anymore." It was the kind of vulnerable moment that reminded people why they had loved her in the first place. Within hours, her video was trending, shared by fans, celebrities, and gossip pages. Yandy breaks her silence was the headline this time, and for a moment, the narrative began to shift. But Mendeecees saw the livestream too, and he wasn't happy. He called her, but she didn't pick up. He texted, "You're making it worse." She replied only once, "It's already worse." A few days later, filming resumed for the reunion special. Producers had warned everyone that emotions were still raw, but no one could predict how volatile it would get. When Yandy arrived, the room buzzed with tension. Erica was already there, sitting on the couch with crossed legs, her phone in hand, pretending not to notice the whispers around her. Mendeecees stood near the back, pacing. The host started with neutral questions, trying to ease into the topic, but the calm didn't last. As soon as Yandy spoke, Erica rolled her eyes, and the camera zoomed in, capturing it all. "See, that's what I mean," Yandy said, gesturing at her. "She can't even let me speak without disrespecting me." "I'm not disrespecting you," Erica said sweetly. "I'm just tired of hearing the same victim story over and over." The audience gasped. Yandy turned, eyes narrowing. "Victim story? Yes," Erica said, voice rising. "You act like you didn't know who you were with." Everybody knew Mendeecees had a past. Don't act brand new now that the truth came out. Mendeecees tried to step in, saying, "Stop, both of you," but neither woman listened. Yandy took a deep breath, her voice trembling but strong. "This isn't about his past. It's about what you did now. You slept with a man you knew was in a relationship, then you smiled in my face. That's not a mistake. That's cruelty." The room erupted. Security stepped closer. The audience was shouting, phones held high to record the chaos. Erica stood up, pointing a manicured finger. "Don't talk to me about cruelty, Yandy. You've been pretending for years. Pretending to be this perfect wife, this role model. Now everyone sees you're just like the rest of us." And that's when Yandy snapped. She stood too, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "No, I'm nothing like you." For a moment, it looked like they might fight. The host yelled for security. The lights flickered, and producers rushed in. Cameras caught every second before cutting to black. The clip went viral before the episode even aired. Everyone had an opinion. Talk shows debated it. Blogs broke it down frame by frame. One gossip commentator said, "This isn't just reality TV anymore. This is personal warfare." After filming, Yandy was escorted out through a side door, still shaking with anger. Mendeecees caught up to her in the hallway. "You can't keep doing this," he said quietly. "Doing what?" "Defending myself." "You're letting them use you," he said. "They don't care about us. They just want the drama." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you gave them one," she replied coldly, walking away. He didn't follow this time. He just watched her leave again, the same way she had walked out before, each step pulling her farther from the life they'd built together. Later that night, Yandy got a call from the network. The reunion footage was breaking records. They wanted her to come back for a follow-up special, to tell her truth. She didn't say yes immediately. Part of her wanted to disappear, to let it fade, but another part, the fighter, the survivor, knew walking away meant letting them control the ending. So she agreed. When news of the special leaked, Erica responded on Instagram with a single sentence: "Truth doesn't need a sequel." It was enough to reignite the fire. Fans took sides again. Team Yandy, Team Erica. Timelines filled with edits, compilations, and think pieces. The feud wasn't dying. It was evolving. Behind the scenes, Mendeecees tried to stay out of it, but the tabloids wouldn't let him. Paparazzi followed him everywhere, snapping photos of him leaving restaurants, visiting his kids, even getting into his car. One picture of him walking with Erica's friend sparked new rumors that he'd already moved on. Yandy saw the photos online before anyone told her. She called him that night. "You really can't stay out of mess, can you?" she said. "It's not what it looks like," he answered. "It never is," she said and hung up. Her mother came over the next morning. "You need to take care of yourself," she said, pouring tea. "The internet isn't real life." But Yandy shook her head. "It's real enough to ruin one." And she was right. The scandal had taken on a life of its own. Brands started pulling endorsements. Producers were pressuring her to deliver bigger reactions. The world wanted more drama, more breakdowns, more tears. And she could feel herself unraveling a little more each day. One evening, she met with an old friend who worked in public relations. He told her to shift the narrative. "You're giving them too much emotion," he said. "Give them purpose instead. Turn this into something empowering. Make it about women standing up for themselves." She thought about it all night. And the next morning, she started planning. She reached out to charities, filmed a short segment about betrayal and rebuilding, and shared it online with a caption that read, "Pain doesn't define you. How you rise does." It exploded. Fans flooded her page with support again. It was the first time in weeks she smiled without forcing it. But Erica wasn't done. She posted a response the same day. Funny how people preach healing after they lose. And with that, the war continued. As the special drew closer, production ramped up. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Rumors spread that Yandy and Mendeecees might reconcile on camera. Others said he'd refuse to appear. When filming began, the tension was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. The host asked her how she felt seeing him again. She paused, looking straight into the lens. "I feel like I'm standing across from someone I used to know," she said quietly. "Someone I loved enough to forgive 1,000 times. But love doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it blinds you until you can't see who's really beside you." Mendeecees shifted in his seat, guilt written all over his face. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, "but I can't change what happened." "You can't," she replied, "but you can stop pretending it didn't." The silence that followed was painful. The audience barely breathed. Somewhere backstage, a producer whispered, "This is the ending we needed." But it wasn't an ending. Not yet. Outside the studio, paparazzi waited like wolves. Fans screamed, flashes went off, and someone shouted, "Yandy, will you take him back?" She didn't answer. She just kept walking, her chin high, her eyes steady, finally looking like someone who had found peace in the wreckage. And as the city lights flickered in the distance, one thing was clear. The story wasn't over. It was only shifting into something deeper, something that would test loyalties, reveal secrets, and prove once again that in this world, truth is never simple, and love is never clean. The next morning, the city woke up to headlines that wouldn't die. The betrayal, the DNA test, the confrontation, it was everywhere. Coffee shops played the clips on TV screens, fans live-tweeted their reactions, and every gossip page had a new theory. Rashida didn't look at her phone. She didn't need to. She already knew what they were saying. She stood by her window, watching the traffic below. It was strange how quiet everything felt inside her apartment, compared to the noise outside. 1 week ago she'd had a husband, a best friend, a family that looked unbreakable on camera. Now all she had was an echo of what used to be. She thought of Mendeecees' face when she walked out of that studio. The way he didn't follow her this time, and how that silence had said everything. Her phone buzzed again. It was her producer. They wanted her reaction for the next episode. They wanted her pain in high definition. Rashida ignored it. She didn't owe them another tear. Not yet. Meanwhile, Erica, the woman who'd once been her friend, was on every talk show that would have her. She smiled through every interview, played the misunderstood card, told the world she didn't mean to fall for Mendeecees, that love doesn't follow rules. The audiences gasped. Some even clapped. "It just happened," she said softly into the microphone. "You can't choose who you love." The clip spread like wildfire. Comments poured in, calling her bold, fearless, heartless. And somewhere in the middle of that noise, she seemed to bloom under the attention. Her manager told her she was trending. Her publicist called it a comeback. Erica smiled for the cameras. But deep down she knew she had crossed a line she could never walk back from. Mendeecees stayed out of sight. Reporters camped outside his building, shouting questions. His friends called to check on him, but he barely answered. He knew he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, but he didn't know how to fix it. Every move he made now would be a headline. Every word would be twisted. One night he drove past Rashida's apartment, parked across the street, and sat there for hours. The lights were off. He wanted to go up, to knock, to beg, but he didn't. Instead, he sent her a text. "I'm sorry." She didn't reply. The next day, she finally called her mother. They hadn't spoken much since the scandal broke. Her mother's voice was calm, too calm. "I saw the interview," she said. "You looked strong." Rashida laughed weakly. "I'm tired of being strong." "Then be something else," her mother said. "Be smart, be free." That night Rashida made a decision. If they wanted a story, she'd give them one, but on her terms. She called the producer back. "I'll do the special," she said, "but it's going to be about truth, not tears." The producer hesitated. "Truth doesn't sell like heartbreak." "Then you've been selling the wrong stories," she said, hanging up. 2 weeks later, cameras rolled again. This time, it wasn't in a studio filled with shouting and spotlights. It was in Rashida's home, quiet, personal, almost sacred. She spoke directly to the lens. No makeup, no script. She talked about forgiveness, about women being reduced to strings, about what betrayal teaches you when it's filmed for the world to see. People think fame protects you, she said. But it doesn't. It just makes your pain public. Everyone wants to see you fall, but no one sticks around to help you stand again. When the segment aired, it went viral within hours. Fans called it her redemption arc. Messages poured in from women saying her words gave them strength. Hashtags of support flooded time. And for the first time in weeks, Rashida felt something close to peace. But Erica watched the special too, and she didn't like it. She felt cornered, exposed. The narrative was slipping from her hands, and she wasn't used to losing control. So she went live that same night. "Don't believe everything you see," she said into her phone. "Some people can cry on cue better than they can love in real life." It was subtle, but everyone knew who she meant. The feud reignited instantly. Fans divided into camps again. Edits, reaction videos, arguments, it all came roaring back. And the producers smiled, knowing chaos meant ratings. Mendeecees, caught in the middle, couldn't take it anymore. He called both women, left messages they never returned. One night, he showed up at Rashida's door, desperate. She opened it, expression blank. "I can't keep living like this," he said. "I didn't want any of this to happen. But it did," she said quietly. "And now you have to live with it." "I still love you," he said. She shook her head. "You love the idea of me, the woman who forgave everything. But that woman's gone." He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes heavy with regret, and walked away for the last time. The next morning, photos of him leaving her building hit the blogs. Rashida and Mendeecees reunion. The headline screamed. She didn't even bother to deny it. She was tired of chasing truth in a world built on lies. A few days later, she packed a small bag and left the city. No announcements, no goodbyes. Just gone. She drove to her grandmother's old house in Georgia, a place where no one cared about cameras or followers. She turned off her phone, sat on the porch, and listened to crickets instead of comment notifications. It took weeks before anyone realized she wasn't coming back. Fans speculated she was filming something new. Others said she was pregnant. Producers begged her to return. She ignored them all. Erica tried to hold on to the spotlight, but it started fading. Without Rashida's presence, the feud lost its spark. People moved on. New scandals replaced hers. Her interviews dried up. Her followers slipped away. She posted a few more times, then stopped, disappearing into the same silence she had once mocked. Months passed before anyone heard from Rashida again. One morning she posted a single picture, sunrise, over the porch. Coffee cup in hand, captioned, "Peace costs everything." It got millions of likes. People called it poetic. But for her, it was just honest. She still thought about Mendeecees sometimes. Not with anger, not with longing, just quiet understanding. She'd learned that love isn't always enough, and truth doesn't always heal. But she had also learned that survival is its own kind of victory. When a journalist later tracked her down for an interview, she agreed, but only on one condition. Number? Drama questions. No DNA test talk. No gossip. She wanted to talk about resilience, rebuilding, real life. The journalist asked her if she missed the show. She smiled. "I don't miss being watched," she said. "I miss being believed." The article was titled "The Woman Who Walked Away from Her Own Storyline." It went viral again, but this time, it wasn't because of scandal. It was because people saw themselves in her. Mendeecees read the interview in a bar downtown. He folded the paper, sighed, and said to himself, "She finally found what I couldn't give her." He raised his glass quietly and whispered, "Good for you." And that was the last anyone heard of them together. In time, the world forgot the details, the tests, the shouting, the chaos. But the story lived on in whispers, retold in clips, remembered in Rashida became a symbol for surviving humiliation with grace. Erica faded into obscurity. Mendeecees tried to rebuild his reputation, but some stains never wash off. And somewhere, in the quiet of her new life, Rashida realized that peace was never about forgetting. It was about knowing you could lose everything and still be whole. The cameras never found her again. The story didn't end when the cameras stopped looking for her. It kept moving through the empty rooms of the old house, through the creak of the porch steps, through the way the morning air cooled the steam off her coffee. Rashida learned the pace of silence, and then she learned to trust it. Her grandmother's photographs watched her from the walls, patient and tender, and in that watchfulness, she found a kind of permission to grow new roots. The town knew her name, but not the way cities do. Here, knowing meant nodding from porches and leaving baskets of peaches at the door without a note. She started jogging at sunrise, not to outrun anything anymore, but to feel her lungs work honestly. She cooked for herself, badly at first, burning rice and scrambling eggs until they turned into rubber. She laughed alone in the kitchen, felt the unfamiliar pleasure of laughing when no one would ever see it, and realized joy didn't need witnesses to exist. Sometimes at dusk the memories returned, not to hurt her, just to be counted. She would sit with them the way you sit with a relative who overstays a visit, listening politely, letting them tire themselves out. She could see the bright set, the questions framed to inflict, the flare of studio lights on tears that weren't ready. She could hear Erica's lacquered voice with its soft edges that cut. She could see Mendeecees' hands twisting. The face of a man who finally understood too late that the truth and the consequences are the same thing wearing different coats. She let all of it pass through her like weather, and then she got up and watered the garden. By early fall, the porch had become her office. A friend of her grandmother's gifted her an old desk, sturdy and stained with ring marks from decades of coffee cups, and she hauled it out to the rail so she could write where the breeze never judged her sentences. She began journaling every morning, not about the scandal but about the ways small kindnesses stitch a life back together. A neighbor named Miss Lou brought a pie, still warm. A boy on a bike returned her mail that had been delivered to houses down. And when she thanked him, he shrugged and said he liked how the envelopes felt in his basket, like he was delivering treasure. Rashida wrote all of it down. After a while, the notebook filled and she started another. When she finally turned on her phone again, the world had moved 3 scandals ahead. The trending cycles were clean slates for people who never learned from yesterday. She scrolled without bitterness, just curiosity. A text from her publicist sat on the screen like a stubborn weed. The network wanted a redemption arc, a limited series, a careful return. The contract was generous in the way money becomes when it wants your soul. Rashida left the message unanswered. She walked to the edge of the yard and stood in her bare feet on the damp grass, feeling the earth remind her that value can be measured by weight that isn't made of zeros. One evening, a church in town asked her to speak at a women's night. No press, they promised. No cameras, just their community. She almost said no, but something in the invitation sounded like the right kind of quiet. She wrote notes on an index card and then left the card at home by accident. And when she walked up to the microphone, she realized she didn't need it. The room was small and warm, smelling like lemon oil and hymnals, and the women watched her with the particular focus of people who know that pain has a shape and an afterlife. She said that surviving is a verb that gets better with practice, that shame is a bully that hates sunlight, that you can lose the version of yourself that the world loved and still keep the version that you love. Afterward, a teenage girl hugged her too hard and whispered thanks into her sweater. Rashida drove home with the windows down, the night heavy with crickets, and felt something settle inside her that had been rattling for months. Far away, Erica tried to conjure a second act. She posted a series of photographs, all immaculate lighting and curated regret. The captions mentioned growth. They mentioned lessons. They never mentioned an apology. Her followers grew suspicious of the gloss. Comments shifted, not cruel but skeptical. There is a moment when an audience decides it has seen enough angles and now wants a straight line. Erica didn't know how to draw one. Her manager suggested a charity partnership, a rebrand, a new wardrobe of humility. The mirror started reflecting a stranger back to her, and she resented it. In her apartment, she practiced sincerity in front of the bathroom light, but the shape of it kept slipping from her mouth. One morning, she turned off her phone and realized she had nobody to call who wasn't paid to answer. That was the first time she cried without mascara making it pretty. Mendeecees moved through the city like a man trying not to bump into his own reputation. He took the back stairs, the less crowded trains, the late-night aisles of the grocery store. He picked up a new kind of work, not the glamorous kind, the kind that starts early and doesn't require anyone to clap. A friend needed help at a garage. Mendeecees learned the grammar of engines and the relief of bolts that finally clicked into place. Under the hood of tired cars, he found quiet equations to solve. Small victories that never made headlines. Grease left honest marks on his hands. At night, he would sit at his kitchen table and write letters he did not send. The letters were not arguments anymore. They were inventories of mistakes. Lists of rooms he should have walked out of 10 minutes earlier and words he should have swallowed. Sometimes he wrote her name at the top of the page and then stopped. As if writing Rashida was a door he could only open if he had the right shoes on. The network didn't give up. A new executive called Rashida and said they wanted something human. Rashida laughed at the word the way you laugh when someone offers you water while you're standing in the rain. She said if they wanted human, they could offer privacy or pay the women whose tears kept their lights on. The executive was quiet for a count that told her this was the first time the idea had occurred to him. He said they could talk about advocacy. She said the conversation would happen at her kitchen table or not at all. A week later, 2 producers drove down and sat on her porch with their hands wrapped around chipped mugs. And for the first time in a long while, Rashida felt the terms move toward fairness. She said there would be rules, no ambush, no performative crossfire, no editing that reorganized her heart. They nodded, like people who wanted redemption for their industry even if they couldn't define it. She called the project a circle rather than a show. It would bring women together who had been embarrassed in public, who had their names turned into punchlines. They would speak plainly about shame and what grows after it. The network agreed to the format because it sounded fresh and because they cared about optics this week. But when the first circle convened in a community center with metal folding chairs and a table of donated muffins, something happened that no executive could script. The cameras felt out of place. They stayed but stepped back. Rashida sat among the women rather than across from them, and said as little as possible. She asked questions that were soft enough to be safe and sharp enough to be useful. One woman described how she stopped checking her phone at night so her dreams could be hers again. Another said she learned to cook for one with both hands, to make a plate as beautiful as if a guest were coming. The footage was simple and devastating in a way that honored what it recorded. When a clip aired, people cried in the comments without irony. The algorithm slowed down to watch. Erica watched too. For a long time, she stared at the screen after the clip ended. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was the absence. And absence is worse. You can fight a villain, argue with one, throw a drink at one. How do you contend with being unnecessary? She messaged Rashida and deleted the message. She messaged again and deleted again. Finally, she wrote for words that stayed. I wasn't brave then. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't deserve the labor of it. She just wanted to name the thing. Rashida read the message on the porch at dusk and let the sky answer for her. The sky said nothing untrue. She put the phone face down. Naming is a start, she thought, not an end. A magazine wanted to profile Rashida with a title that used the word phoenix. She said no. She wasn't flames and spectacle. She was a woman who woke up early and made her bed so that she could unmake it at night with the satisfaction of ritual. She chose a smaller outlet instead. A writer who asked about her grandmother's porch and meant it. The piece mentioned her coffee, the color of the hydrangeas, the ways the town remembered her without favor or resentment. At the end, the writer said Rashida had learned to be ordinary in a world that pays extra for extremes. That sentence made people inhale slowly like they'd been running. The article was shared in group chats that said nothing out loud. Mendeecees saw the article because someone left the paper at the garage. He folded it along the seam and put it in his bag, not sure what to do with it but unwilling to throw it away. That night he wrote the last letter. It wasn't an ask or a report. It felt like a benediction he did not know how to pronounce. He wrote that he had put the ring in a small box on a shelf, and that sometimes when he walked by he pressed the lid down with his thumb as if to make sure time stayed closed. He wrote that he hoped laughter returned to her house first and that the rest of joy would find the door afterward. He wrote his name carefully, the way a man signs the end of something he wants to be worthy of. Winter crept in around the edges of the house. Rashida bought a space heater that ticked softly like a metronome for a slower life. She wore thick socks and learned how to make soup from bones, letting it simmer all day until the windows fogged with patient steam. She put lights around the porch railing and turned them on early because dusk arrives sooner than sadness when you're prepared. The Circle recorded one more session before the holidays and then took a break, because people need to hold their families with both hands in December. On the last day of filming, the crew hugged her like a colleague and left without a final shot, which is another way of saying they understood. New Year's morning, Rashida woke before the sun and walked to the end of the road. The sky was pale and open, the kind of empty that promises rather than threatens. She whispered a resolution to the ditch, because the ditch keeps secrets and grows things anyway. The resolution wasn't about love or work. It was about attention. She promised to pay better attention to the parts of life that don't ask for applause. When she got home, she made pancakes too thick and ate them standing up by the sink, which is a ceremony that requires no witnesses. The phone rang again. Different tone, different intention. A teacher from the local high school asked if she would speak to a media class about editing and ethics. Rashida said yes without thinking. She sat in a fluorescent classroom at a scuffed table while teenagers asked better questions than adults get paid to. One girl said, "What do you do when telling the truth hurts someone?" Rashida answered that we have to ask whether we are telling the truth for clarity or for power. If the answer is power, it is not truth, it is theater. The room was quiet for a long second, and then pencils scratched like small animals. Afterward, a boy with nervous hands asked for advice on filming his grandmother making biscuits. Rashida said to start the camera and then forget it's there. In the city, Erica tried something nobody expected. She stopped performing. She volunteered at a shelter 2 mornings a week where nobody knew her last name. She sorted donations, learned which fabrics dignified a person and which scratched at their story. After a month, the coordinator asked her to help with intake because she listened without finishing people's sentences. One afternoon, a woman said she had been embarrassed in public and felt like she lived in that moment. Now, Erica looked down at the clipboard and said quietly, "I know that room. My exit was messy." The woman exhaled like a door opening. Erica drove home afterward and parked for a long time, forehead on the steering wheel, crying in a way that wasn't about loss anymore but about finding the part of herself that had been hiding behind the lights. The network sent Rashida the first cut of the Circles pilot. She watched it with her hands clasped and her jaw tight, prepared to fight. But the edit was gentle, almost reverent. There were pauses that stayed pauses, silences that kept their full meaning. The women were not characters, they were women. Rashida wrote back, "Keep the breath where the breath belongs." They did. When the show premiered, it didn't trend like a scandal. It spread like a recommendation between friends who mean well for each other. Ratings climbed slowly instead of spiking. And somebody in a boardroom called it sustainable, which is the closest television comes to gratitude. Mendeecees came across the circle in a waiting room with a muted TV. He watched without asking them to turn the volume up, reading the closed captions like a prayer card. He recognized Rashida's posture even when her body was still. The elegant alertness of someone who can hear the weather change in a person. A mechanic called his name, and he stood, wished the screen well, and followed the sound of his own repair. Spring loosened the ground. Flowers began again where they were supposed to. The town threw a little fair for no reason besides weather and the human impulse to dance when the sun permits it. Rashida worked the lemonade stand for an hour and didn't spill a cup. A child ran up with sticky hands and told her she looked like someone famous. Rashida smiled and said she looked like someone local. Later, she sat on the lawn and listened to a cover band ruin and redeem the same song in one go. Nothing about the day needed to be posted to be real. Letters arrived at the house now like birds who had learned the new route. Women wrote to say that they had turned off their notifications, or turned on their ovens, or turned toward themselves without apology. One man wrote to say he had ended an argument halfway through and learned that silence can be a gift if you hand it to someone gently. Rashida kept the letters in a tin and read them when the rain tried to make her house a ship. The tin filled, and she found another. One afternoon, she received an envelope with handwriting she didn't recognize at first because it was careful in a new way. Mendeecees' letter arrived like a long exhale. She read it leaning against the kitchen counter, a spoon still in her hand. The words did not ask her to return to any version of what had been. They did not argue with the past or apply cologne to it. They were a letting go that felt like blessing. She put the letter in the tin with the others. Not because it belonged to the crowd, but because it belonged to the world she lived in now. A world where people try again at being better, without demanding an audience for the attempt. Months later, Erica stood in a grocery store aisle comparing rice brands like a person untangling her own metaphors. A woman approached her, shy. She said, "Are you Erica?" Erica braced. The woman said, "I saw you at the center. You made space for me that day." Erica nodded, felt the room tilt with gratitude that had nothing to do with fame, and said, "I'm learning." The woman squeezed her arm. A simple press that said continue. At the register, Erica switched places with a man counting nickels and told the cashier to put the difference on her card. Then walked to the parking lot with her head down, not to hide but to concentrate on not crying again. Rashida built a workshop from the circle, small classes in town halls and church basements, teaching people how to tell a story without giving their power away. She taught them about the cut, the cruel science of it, and the ways to keep their voice from sounding like someone else's in the edit. She said to ask for the footage if they can, to own the words they said, even if a contract pretends it owns them. She taught boundaries as choreography, how to step out of a question before it corners you. The rooms filled steadily, mostly with women and occasionally with men who looked relieved to be allowed to feel complicated in public. On a summer evening that tasted like peaches and dust, Rashida sat on her porch and watched a storm gather from far off. The sky browned at the edges like a photograph aging. Wind rose and then quieted in that way storms do before they introduce themselves. She thought of the first night after the interview. The way her hands had shaken. The way her breath caught like a sweater, snagged on a nail. She thought of the long road between that girl at the window and the woman listening to thunder choose its words carefully. She said thank you to no one in particular, which is another way of saying thank you to everyone. The storm came and went. Lights flickered and held. The house smelled like wet wood and clean endings. She made tea and carried it to the porch where the boards were damp and grateful. Fireflies rehearsed their small miracles. Rashida took out a notebook, the first one in a while, and wrote a sentence that did not try to be profound. Today was enough. It sat on the page with the authority of a fact. She underlined it once. Then she closed the notebook and let night do what it does best, which is drape and bless and keep. In another zip code, Mendeecees locked up the garage, hands scrubbed clean but not erased. He walked past a bar that had a TV shouting about a new scandal. He didn't look up. He stopped at a florist instead and bought 3 sunflowers because he wanted to put bright things in the room where he slept. The florist wrapped them in paper that sounded like applause, and he laughed at the coincidence of it. At home, he put the flowers in a jar and sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. The sunflowers were enough light. Erica posted a photo after months of posting. Nothing. It was a picture of a sunrise through a streaked window. The caption said, "Learning how to show up without stealing the scene." Comments were gentle. Some people did not return, and that was fair. The ones who stayed wrote words that sounded like chairs drawn up to a table where conversation could finally start. Autumn pulled a sweater over the town's shoulders. The Circle's new season filmed without fanfare. The crew knew where to park and how to carry cables without scratching the floor. They greeted the women by name because respect is a habit you practice, not a technique you pull out under pressure. Rashida opened each session with a breath and a sentence that changed every time. "I'm glad you came." Or, "Take your time." Or, "We stop if you say stop." The phrases were small, and they were architecture. People walked across them safely. A journalist asked Rashida if she would ever return to the bright set with its glittering traps. Rashida smiled and said that brightness is not the same thing as light. The journalist wrote it down and then wrote it down again because some sentences deserve a second layer of ink. The piece ran under a quiet headline and was read slowly by the right people. One night, the town hosted a screening of The Circle in the high school auditorium. Families came in their church shoes and their Saturday hats. The episode played on a mediocre projector and looked better than it ever had, because the laughter in the room fixed what the pixels couldn't. After the credits rolled, nobody clapped right away. They let the silence hold them steady before they released it. Then the applause was not for drama but for honesty. Rashida stood on the aisle and hugged strangers like neighbors. Later, back on the porch, she counted her breaths like rosary beads. The stars looked unedited. A kerosene lamp in a neighbor's window cast a soft oval on the grass, and Rashida felt the old ache flicker at the edges of her chest. Not as pain but as proof that she was still attached to this world. She remembered the letter in the tin and the message from Erica that never asked for permission to be forgiven, only asked for the chance to be accurate. She thought of how stories don't end. They curve. Beginnings hide in middles. Middles learn how to end and end again. She whispered goodnight to the names that used to live in her mouth like a storm and now lived like rainfall that grew her garden. The cicadas tuned themselves. The air softened. Somewhere a dog barked twice and decided that was enough. Rashida closed her eyes and slept in a house that had learned her. A house that held what she had been and what she might be with equal care. In the morning, she would wake to the faithful rattle of the screen door, make coffee that tasted like work done right, and step again into a day that did not need to prove itself to anyone. The camera that mattered had been inside her all along, recording what she chose to keep. A woman, ordinary and precise, practicing the art of staying true when nobody is looking and, sweetest of all, when they are. This story is a work of fiction and does not depict real people, events, or organizations. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The room feels smaller when truth finally sits down. It doesn't bang on the door. It doesn't shout. It arrives like a draft under the window and changes the temperature of everything. That is the air tonight, steady and certain. As the last cameras warm to life and the last mic checks fade into the corners, the voiceover begins where all endings begin. In the quiet before somebody decides to speak, Rashida stands behind the curtain with her palms pressed together, not in prayer, not in fear, but in readiness. She knows now that readiness is a posture, a way to hold yourself so the storm passes through without stealing anything you plan to keep outside. The auditorium hums with low conversation, the kind that means anticipation has a heartbeat. People have come for closure the way people come for weather updates during hurricane season. They want the forecast even if it cannot change the wind. Mendeecees sits 2 rows from the front, not hiding, not announcing himself, just occupying a chair like any other member of the public. The seat beside him is empty by choice. He keeps his hands folded, and when he looks at the stage, it's with the patience of a man who learned that apologies are not doors. They are windows you open for air and then step back from so others can breathe. Erica slips in by a side aisle. Early enough to avoid focus, late enough to confirm she is not the center. Her hair is simple, her face is sober. She keeps her phone in her bag. There is nothing it can do for her here. She has made a promise to herself that tonight she will only name what is hers to name and leave the rest untouched. She has learned that silence used to be her weapon. Now it will be her boundary. The moderator walks out first. Soft voice, clear eyes, nothing flashy. She explains what tonight is not before she says what it is. It is not a tribunal, not a reunion brawl, not a rerun of old wounds for the sake of ratings. It is a conversation that acknowledges the ruins and also the rebuilding. The rubble, and also the rooms that rose because someone refused to waste the bricks. She invites Rashida to the stage. Lights rise like a tide. Rashida steps into them without flinching. She does not look smaller. She does not look larger. She looks exact. The first words come out quiet. And the room leans forward because quiet has more voltage when a crowd expects thunder. She says that people keep asking for an ending. As if an ending were a button you press, and the story folds itself neatly and goes back into the box. She says endings in real life are less precise and more generous. They leave space. They let you walk around them. They let you visit later with less fear. She says she is here to place the last stones, not to bury anything living. She talks about the aftermath the way a firefighter talks about smoke patterns, with respect for what it means and without romance for what it destroys. The months alone, the porch mornings, the letters that arrived like small birds and the one letter that arrived like rain. The circle, how it started as a promise and turned into a practice. How women who didn't know each other learned to say their names without apology again. She does not mention numbers. She doesn't have to. Impact is better counted in sleep restored and appetite returned. The moderator asks the question everyone brought with them, like a ticket. What would you tell the version of yourself who stood under those studio lights the night the world decided your tears were programming? Rashida looks out past the spotlights, past the faces, to a place only she can see. She says she would tell that woman to keep two things close and two things far. Keep close the people who speak to your dignity before they speak to your audience. Keep close the work that plants you where no applause can uproot you. Keep far the mirrors that were built to distort. Keep far the hands that only clap when you are breaking in row 2. Mendeecees exhales as if he has been holding that breath since summer. The camera does not find him. It doesn't need to. His role tonight is not to be seen. It is to understand, fully and finally, that some stories ask you to stand up and fix what you broke. And some stories ask you to sit down and let the person you hurt have the whole stage. He does not count minutes. He does not check his phone. This is what he owes. Presence without interference, witness without defense. The moderator turns to the room. She invites questions written on cards, anonymous by design. The cards arrive in quiet stacks, folded and unfolded, ink smudged where hands trembled. Rashida reads the first aloud. How do you forgive what made you famous? She takes her time. Forgiving, she says, is not a gift we give the past. It is a tool we use on the present so it will not rust into a future we never wanted. Fame is a loud room. I choose smaller rooms now, not because I am hiding, but because I have learned that ordinary is where healing fits best. Another card. Did you ever want revenge? She smiles, tired and kind. Of course. But revenge is a bad liar. It tells you that once you even the score, you'll feel balanced. What actually happens is you step onto a seesaw built by someone else and they decide when you rise and when you drop. I got off the ride. I built a bench. I sit there with my coffee. It's steady. Someone asks about love without saying the word. Rashida answers without saying it either. She says there are relationships that survive by forgetting and relationships that survive by remembering correctly. She says memory can be a museum or a chapel. She chose chapel, a place to sit, to light a small candle, to say thank you for what was real and no to what will never be again. The room understands. The understanding has a sound. It is not applause. It is the shared quiet that follows truth when it does its work cleanly from the side aisle. Erica listens with her chin slightly lifted, not a defiance. More like a person learning how to balance a new crown, called accountability. A volunteer offers the mic to anyone who wishes to speak. She waits, heart knocking like a visitor who does not know if they are welcome. She stands. No flourish. No throat clearing. She says her name and it takes less courage than it used to because she is no longer trying to sell it. She says she watched a woman suffer while she managed her image. She says she confused attention with affection and strategy with survival. She says she is learning the difference between confession and performance, and tonight she came to choose confession. She does not describe the past. She names the present. I am sorry for being careless with another person's life. I am trying to live in a way that no one's pain becomes my costume. Again, the room does not cheer. It keeps faith with the tone of the evening. Rashida does not rush to accept or reject. She nods once, not as a stamp, but as a receipt. Message received, work ongoing. Afterward, when the line forms for hugs and handshakes and a few photographs snapped politely, Erica joins the end of it with the patience of someone who knows there are no shortcuts left. When it is her turn, she reaches out. Rashida takes her hand. They hold it for the correct amount of time, which is the length of a breath that says we are both people and we will prove that. In the days that follow more than in the seconds we share in public, as the event winds down, the moderator invites Rashida to close the night with a reflection. She steps to the edge of the stage and sits, feet dangling, an old gesture from earlier chapters. A reminder that grace looks younger when it doesn't try to tower. She says there is a kind of power that loves microphones and bright bulbs. And there is a kind of power that loves kitchens and quiet tables. Tonight belongs to the second kind. She thanks the women who taught her how to build chairs where there used to be thrones. She thanks the town that showed her how to be normal without shrinking. She thanks the viewers who learned to listen without demanding a spectacle outside. The air tastes like rain that changed its mind. People spill onto the sidewalk wrapped in their own thoughts. The crew packs cables gently because the equipment has heard enough shouting for one lifetime. Mendeecees lingers by the exit until the crowd thins. He does not intercept, he allows the flow to decide for him. Eventually the path clears and the door opens again, and Rashida steps into the late hour. They see each other at a distance, measured not in feet but in seasons. He raises a hand in a small greeting that says, I am here, and I am not here to take anything. She nods, a simple acknowledgement that says I see you and I have nothing to add and nothing to subtract. A car pulls up. She gets in. The door closes without drama. Quiet does what quiet does best. It keeps later, on the porch that became a sanctuary, and then a studio, and then simply a porch again. Rashida sits with a pen and a sheet of paper. She writes a note to the future audience. The ones who will stream tonight months from now when their own lives feel too loud or too thin. She writes that healing is not cinematic. It is repetitive. It is a schedule kept with yourself. Sleep, water, food, movement, stillness. Repeat. She writes that dignity is a muscle and boundaries are bones. She writes that tenderness is not weakness. It is precision. She folds the page and tucks it into a book on the rail. The note is not meant to be found. The writing was the delivery inside. Her phone blinks once with a message from the team. The numbers are good. The comments are different. People are talking to each other instead of at the screen. Someone wrote that they muted their device and listened to their own breathing for 5 minutes and that it felt like meeting a friend they had neglected. Someone else wrote that they messaged a person they had harmed without asking to be comforted in return. Impact is rarely loud. Tonight it is measurable in these small proofs that the show turned into a mirror and the mirror did not lie far across town. Erica sits at her kitchen table with a glass of water and a legal pad. She lists what she will stop doing and what she will start. She will stop making grief decorative. She will stop treating apologies as currency. She will start showing up where nobody cares about blue checks. She will start asking people what they need before she starts narrating what she thinks they feel. The list is not art. It is architecture. She tapes it inside a cabinet where she will see it when she reaches for a plate and be reminded that meals are built. And so are better days. Mendeecees returns to his apartment and sets his keys down without the old sigh. He takes the sunflowers from their jar to trim the stems. A small act of stewardship that would have felt theatrical once and now just feels correct. He sits at the table and does not write. There are no more letters left. There is just the business of living with enough steadiness that regret becomes a teacher and not a landlord. He sets an alarm for the morning. He will be at the garage early. He will torque a bolt until it gives, and that will be a kind of prayer the broadcast team prepares. The final cut of the episode that will serve as the capstone to a season nobody expected. The editor leaves the pauses intact. The supervising producer deletes a dramatic sting from the timeline and chooses the clean audio of the room breathing instead. The director writes a note to the crew, thanking them for choosing restraint. Somewhere between frame 1 and the credits, the show learns that restraint can be its own special effect, and as the final render clocks out, the narrator returns for the last arc of the voiceover. The voice that has carried the audience through wreckage and repair. It says the spectacle has been quieted, and the story has been fed. It says some endings are not fireworks. They are porch lights left on, guiding whoever needs to arrive late and still find the door. It invites the audience to consider their own rooms, their own mirrors, their own benches instead of seesaws. It offers one last image. A woman closing a notebook because the sentence, "She wrote is enough for tonight." The camera dissolves into evening. A color the network cannot brand. Credits roll without swagger. Only names on the screen. Ordinary and exact. Each one a person who chose to make something complicated feel clear. After the last name, there is a bead of black, not long enough to be uncomfortable, just long enough to be respectful. Then the feed returns to the channel, where other programs wait their turn, louder and shinier. And the audience is left with a rare silence that does not ask to be filled. And now, because this is a video and the screen is still yours, the voice that guided you here turns toward you. It does not bark orders. It offers an open palm. It says if this chapter met you where you needed, you can carry it forward. You can speak to someone softly tonight instead of scrolling past them. You can remember a boundary and keep it. You can choose small, honest rooms over large, hungry ones. And if you want more of these stories told this way, you know what to do. But first, take a breath. Count to 5. Let it out. The lights will wait. The world can hold now. The image fades again, not too black, but to the soft grain of a porch in morning light, and it lingers there, asking nothing except that you keep what matters and let the rest go. The porch was quiet except for the faint creak of wood that had learned her footsteps by heart. Morning light spread across the boards in soft lines, the kind that remind you how much peace owes to ordinary things. Rashida sat with her notebook open, the steam from her cup tracing thin ribbons in the air. There were no scripts left to follow, no producers calling, no headlines waiting for her reaction. The story that had once swallowed her whole had finally learned to rest. Down the road, the small town moved at its steady rhythm. Kids rode bikes. A man at the bakery lifted trays of bread into the window. Someone's radio hummed low through an open door. She listened to the ordinary noise and smiled because it no longer sounded like distance. It sounded like belonging. She thought about how long it had taken to get here through the mess. The noise, the moments when she thought her name would always carry the taste of someone else's choices. But time had done what time does best. It rearranged the sharp edges into shapes she could live with. Healing hadn't come all at once. It had come slowly, in tiny proofs that she was still here, still breathing, still herself. When the mail arrived, she didn't expect anything important. Most of it was the usual flyers, bills, offers she would never need. But tucked between them was an envelope with handwriting she recognized before she even looked at the name. The ink was steady, like someone who had rehearsed sincerity. She turned it over in her hands for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page. He had written that life had softened him, that he didn't expect an answer, that the things he once chased had shrunk under the weight of perspective. He wrote that he was grateful she had taught him something about truth, how it demands care, not performance. And at the end, he wrote only 3 words. I remember right. She folded the paper carefully and slid it into the tin box where she kept the letters from strangers who had written after the circle aired. It belonged there, among the voices that had found her when she wasn't looking for anyone. She didn't feel anger, or nostalgia, or the ache of what if, just quiet recognition that not all endings are debts. Some are simple acknowledgments that 2 people met, broke, and learned. Later that day she drove into town for groceries. The cashier smiled. Not the kind of smile that hides curiosity, but one that meant she was just happy to see her. A boy bagging items looked up shyly and said his mom watched her show with the women telling their stories, and that it made his house feel lighter. Rashida thanked him, realizing how strange it felt to be thanked for something that had once come from pain. On her way out, she passed a wall plastered with local announcements, yard sales, choir practice, a missing cat. Among them was a small flyer with the Circle's logo. New sessions starting this fall. Someone else had printed it. The project no longer belonged only to her. It had grown its own legs, its own voice. She liked that. Stories should outlive the hands that made them. Back home, the sky turned orange and silver as the sun began to fold into the hills. She made dinner, something simple, ate on the porch, and watched as the first fireflies appeared like tiny punctuation marks at the edge of the dark. She thought of Erica then, not with bitterness but with understanding. Sometimes people are mirrors, sometimes they're storms, sometimes they're both. And forgiveness, she'd learned, wasn't about rewriting what happened. It was about refusing to let the past keep the microphone. A car passed on the road, headlights sweeping over the grass. She looked up, half expecting it to slow, but it didn't. Whoever it was, they were headed somewhere else, and that was okay. She liked the feeling of being part of someone's scenery instead of their story. She leaned back in her chair, eyes tracing constellations she didn't know the names of, and let her mind wander to what might come next. Not the kind of next that cameras chase, but the kind that happens quietly. New people, new seasons, new ways of being ordinary. Maybe one day she'd write again, not about betrayal or redemption, but about mornings like this, where nothing needed saving. Inside the house, her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. The world could wait. She had learned the value of letting silence finish its sentence. And somewhere between the hum of crickets and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, she realized she didn't need closure. She already had peace. The next morning began with a pale stripe of light across the floor, thin as a ribbon and just as deliberate. Rashida woke to it and didn't rush. The habit of rushing had been trained out of her by months of choosing slowness like medicine. She stretched, listened to the house settle, and made coffee with the same care she used to save for final takes. On the porch, steam lifted from the cup into the cool air and vanished. A small sermon about letting go that repeated itself every day whether she listened or not. Mail came later than usual, the truck coughing along the gravel as if it needed encouragement. She walked to the box barefoot, the stones pressing little facts into her skin, and pulled out a stack of envelopes. A familiar thin parcel slid free, wrapped in brown paper and tied with red string. No return address, only her name. She took it inside and set it on the kitchen table like it might decide its own opening time. When she untied the string, a notebook fell out, handmade, the paper thick, the cover soft with imperfect edges. A note was tucked inside, small handwriting, a stranger's voice. I don't know you. I know what you did for me. When they laughed at me, I learned to make rooms where laughing felt wrong. I invite women into those rooms now. This notebook is for the stories that happen after the camera turns off. Thank you for making space where I could decide who I am again. Rashida pressed the note to the table as if to iron it into memory. Then placed the notebook by the window where the light could bless it without bleaching it. She drove to town for the farmer's market because peaches were in season and peaches ask you to be present. The market was a kind of quiet that included voices. Vendors called out the names of their produce like introductions at a small party. Someone had set up a folding table with second-hand books and a jar labeled "Leave $1. Take a story." A teenager with a shaved head and a grin sold lemonade that tasted like a lesson learned correctly on the second try. Rashida bought a bag of peaches so heavy it made her smile, and as she turned to leave, a woman at the far end waved her over. I watched your circle, the woman said, no rush in her words. I'm not here to take a picture. I just wanted to say, I used to be loud when I was afraid. I'm quieter now. It feels like truth is easier to hear at this volume. Rashida thanked her, and they stood for a moment in the small chapel of two people, understanding each other without history. On the drive back, the radio fuzzed in and out between stations the way it always did near the old bridge. For a few seconds, a song found her, the kind she hadn't heard since High Floors and Higher Expectations. And she turned it down gently, like soothing a child waking from a bad dream. The road curved and delivered her home in the same faithful way it had yesterday and would tomorrow. She parked, carried the peaches inside, and let them sit on the counter until the kitchen smelled like a promise. When she finally bit into one, juice ran down her wrist and she laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was real enough to make a mess. In the afternoon, she sat with the new notebook and wrote not about the past, but about the choreography of a good day. Wake, breathe, water, the mint on the steps. Answer only the messages that are invitations, not ultimatums. Cook something that refuses to be rushed. Write a sentence you don't hate. She listed the names of women from the circle who had stayed in touch and noted beside each one a small victory they'd shared. A job accepted without apologizing for needing time off on Wednesdays. A boundary held through a holiday. A smile in a mirror meant for kindness instead of inspection. The list felt like planting. She didn't need an audience to clap for it. Roots don't require applause. Toward evening, the sky did that thing where clouds slid into place like cards being laid out carefully. Rain threatened, then reconsidered. A car pulled up to the edge of the yard and It wasn't a surprise exactly, but it wasn't expected. Erica stepped out, not dressed for television, dressed like someone who intended to be believed. She stood by the fence with both hands visible, posture soft, eyes steady. Rashida stayed on the porch a long breath before she walked down the steps and crossed the yard, the grass giving underfoot like it approved of the approach. They stopped an arm's length apart, past and present standing where they could touch if they chose. I called before, Erica said, but the call belonged to your voicemail. I'm not here to take anything. I wanted to leave this. She held out a small, dog-eared booklet from the shelter downtown, the intake forms and a schedule scribbled with notes. We built a class from your circle. We don't film it. We sit in a room and we name things. I brought you one because your name doesn't have to be on it for it to be yours, a little. Rashida didn't take it right away. She let the offer hang in the air so it could earn its weight. Then she nodded. Thank you. They stood a little longer, the way people do when they are trying to move correctly through a doorway neither of them owns. I said something in that auditorium, Erica went on, and I meant it. I've been practicing meaning it with my hands, not my captions. I'm not asking for friendship. I'm not returning to the old rooms. I'm just trying to live in a way that keeps me honest. Rashida looked at her and saw not a headline, not a rival, not a threat. She saw a person who had decided to subtract spectacle from her diet and was walking around thinner for the better. You don't need my permission, Rashida said, but if you came for a sentence, take this one. Keep going. Erica smiled in a way that didn't land on her face so much as rise from it. She left the booklet in Rashida's outstretched hand and returned to her car without turning around for a final line. The engine started, the car reseated, and the yard filled back in the space where she had been standing, like water. Night arrived in a careful gradient. Rashida boiled pasta because it's forgiving. She ate at the kitchen counter and read the shelter schedule. The penciled-in topics: telling the truth privately, healthy silence, the apology you can sustain, leaving rooms gracefully. She pictured women and a few men sitting on metal chairs, cups of water sweating on the tile. Bravery visiting the building like it had found her address at last. She placed the booklet beside the notebook from the morning, two artifacts from separate lives that now cooperated on the table without competing. The phone buzzed once. The crew had sent a cut from the upcoming season of The Circle. She hesitated, pressed play, and watched her own face at a corner of the screen as other faces filled the center. The editors had learned to trust stillness. They let a woman struggle through her second sentence without offering her a lifeboat of music. They kept the camera wide, so nobody's sorrow took up more room than the chair it sat in. When the woman found her words, she didn't cry. She exhaled. Rashida felt the bright hot swell of pride that doesn't need to be named. The message from the crew came a few seconds later. Hope we got it right. Rashida typed back. You did? Thank you for letting people be whole. She slept well. The kind of sleep that has dreams but no alarms. The next day brought errands that refused to turn into anecdotes. She liked that, too. At the hardware store, a clerk with silver hair asked how much weight a shelf needed to hold and didn't seem surprised when she said books and a plant that doesn't apologize for taking sunlight. She bought nails and a small hammer and a level because balance, like dignity, benefits from tools. By afternoon, the shelves were up, slightly imperfect in a way that made the room friendlier. She lined them with the letters tin, the new notebook. 3 novels she loved because they told the truth quietly, and a framed photograph of her grandmother holding a pie, which is the shape love sometimes takes when it wants to be eaten. She stepped back and let the feeling of enoughness do its work. A truck rumbled past on the road and a familiar figure waved from the passenger seat. The kid from the market. Lemonade entrepreneur, now riding with his uncle to deliver lumber. He shouted something over the engine and pointed at her porch as if asking whether stories still happen there. She lifted her hand and made a little circle in the air. Signal for maybe later. He laughed. The truck went on, and the day returned to its hum. Toward evening, a message arrived from the moderator. A school in the next county wanted a visit. Not to film, to talk about how to listen. Rashida said yes and meant it. The auditorium smelled like pencil shavings and tile cleaner. Students filed in with the restless grace of people who haven't yet learned how heavy attention can be. The questions they wrote on cards were less cynical than the questions adults asked. How do you stop replaying the worst moment? 1 read. You give your mind new work, Rashida said. You assign it small tasks. Count the breaths, taste your food, name 5 blue things. The room tried it with her. The banner, the hoodie, the geometry textbook, the gum wrapper. The sky seen through the high window. Silence reorganized itself. Another card. What if the truth makes people leave? Then they were never furniture. She said, they were folding chairs. You can stack them by the door. Laughter rose, surprised and clean, and then quiet again, the respectful kind. Driving home in dusk, she passed a roadside stand with a hand-painted sign. Tomatoes honest. She pulled over and bought a basket. The seller, a woman with a braid like a rope, said the word honest as if it were a flavor. Rashida tasted one later and decided the woman was right. The Circle's premiere night arrived without ceremony. No carpets, no flash. The episode aired while the town ate dinner. On screens across places she would never see, people watched women rearrange their courage. Online, comments took longer to appear and then stayed longer when they did. A sign that viewers were typing with both hands, thinking as they wrote. None of it crawled under Rashida's skin the way it had once done. She didn't refresh. She washed dishes, humming a tune that had no chorus and didn't need one. Weeks passed into their own rhythm. The shelter class kept meeting. Erica sent updates occasionally, never asking for a reply. Mendeecees sent nothing, and that, too, was its own form of care. Rashida's days stretched and closed like reliable books. When it rained, she worked indoors and pretended the sound was applause for ordinary attempts. When it was sunny, she walked the long loop and waved at the same dog who never barked, only wagged as if he understood that friendliness makes fewer demands than allegiance. One late afternoon, the power went out, not a violent outage, just a shrug from the grid. The house held its breath and then settled into quiet as if relieved to be relieved of all the electric insistence. Rashida lit a candle and sat on the floor. The room looked different in amber, honest, and a little older, like it was telling her its true age. She took the notebook and wrote a sentence for the circle's next opening. Tonight we will practice the art of letting a pause be a paragraph. She smiled at the line, not because it was clever, but because it was useful. By the time the lights returned, the candle had built a small cathedral of wax. She blew it out and whispered a thanks to the dark, and still, the world beyond the town kept spinning faster than was good for it. New storms arrived, new names rose and fell on the scroll. Occasionally someone tagged her, asking for a reaction to this or that noise. She learned to let those requests pass like trains she didn't need to board. If a person really needed her, they found the quieter channels. Those she answered with her full attention. Once, just before sleep, she imagined the old set, the bright laughter, the dangerous music, the reactions like currency. The picture didn't sting. It sat in her mind like a museum postcard from an exhibit she had once attended and no longer needed to revisit. She placed the postcard in an invisible drawer and closed it with a satisfied click. The next dawn was pale and generous. Birds argued softly in the maple, as if even their disagreements had good manners. Rashida brewed coffee and stepped onto the porch, carrying a peach that had finally admitted it was ready. Across the road, the boy on the bike coasted by, one hand on the bars, the other high in the air as if balancing an invisible future. She raised her cup to him in salute and he grinned. Because endings that keep a little space for continuation are the only kind worth believing in. She opened the notebook and wrote a final line for the day. A line simple enough to survive translation into any moment. Keep what is kind. Refuse what is hungry for your ruin. Rest when you can. Begin when you must. Then she closed the cover, not because the story had finished, but because beginnings deserve a fresh page, and she had plenty of pages left. The screen fades from the last frame of the story into a slow roll of quiet music. The voice that has carried the audience this far takes one more breath. You've heard a story tonight about love and mistakes, about learning how to live again when the noise dies down. You've watched people rebuild what pride had broken, and you've seen how silence can sometimes speak louder than any argument. But remember this, everything you've heard here is fiction. The names, the places, the heartbreaks, they were built to hold a truth you might recognize in yourself. What happens next belongs to you. Somewhere out there, someone is standing at the same edge, deciding whether to forgive, whether to start again, whether to speak or stay still. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there now. And if you are, know this, there is always a way back to yourself. Sometimes it looks like peace. Sometimes it looks like a porch light that never turns off. The story leaves you here on purpose. It asks you to think about the moments that shape you, not the loud ones, but the quiet turns, the times you chose patience instead of revenge, understanding instead of proof. Those are the moments that rebuild a life. If you found something in this story that felt familiar, take a second before you scroll away. Breathe. Think about who might need to hear something gentle tonight. Maybe send them this video, or maybe just send them a message that says, you're not alone. Because that's what these stories are for. Not gossip, not chaos, but connection. The camera drifts over the final image of the porch, the notebook still open on the rail. The voice continues, softer now. Every story we tell carries a little mirror inside it. Sometimes it reflects pain, sometimes growth, sometimes it just shows you that survival can be quiet. And if you've come this far, that means something in you is still listening. So, thank you for staying, for feeling, for remembering that even the messiest hearts can find rhythm again. And if you want more stories like this, if you want to see where healing goes next, you know what to do. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with us. Not because the algorithm demands it, but because stories like this survive when people care enough to keep them alive. Every week we'll bring you voices that sound like truth, not perfect, not polished, but real. Stories that remind you you're allowed to start over as many times as it takes. The voice pauses. So before you go, do one small thing. Close your eyes and think about the one person you'd forgive if the world stopped watching. Think about the one dream you'd chase if nobody could record it. Think about the one version of yourself that deserves another chance. Hold on to that. That's your story now. The music rises, gentle but certain. Thank you for watching, for listening, for believing that redemption isn't a headline, it's a habit. If you're ready for more, click the bell, stay tuned, and tell us in the comments what part of this journey spoke to you most. Your words might be the thing that helps someone else stand up tomorrow. The porch light flickers once. Steady. Until next time, take care of your peace, take care of your truth, and take care of the people who meet you halfway. This is where we leave the story, but not where it ends. Because stories like this, and people like you, always find their way back to the light. The screen fades to black.